Hey guys, so I wanted to talk to you today about how exercise affects the immune system. So this is a pretty topical kind of topic at the moment, and you might notice that no matter how restrictive these lockdown laws get, there's always the allocation for time and availability to leave the house to exercise. And so, what's the deal with that? Like, why is exercise seen as such an essential service, really? It's been mentioned in the same way that hospitals are being kept open, healthcare businesses are being kept open, supermarkets are being kept open, and you're being encouraged to move and exercise. Now, one is obviously the mental health benefits, and that's massive, but there are some really, really important immune benefits as well for people to be able to get out and exercise. So I recently heard an interview with Dr. David Neiman. Now, Dr. Neiman is a professor of health and exercise science and is an expert in exercise immunology. So a lot of his research looks at how exercise impacts the immune system, and a lot of his research started with he and some friends of his who are marathon runners noticing that while they were doing their normal training, they felt a bit protected from things like the common cold and flu and sore throats, runny noses, that kind of thing. But overwhelmingly, he and a lot of his friends noticed that in the days after a marathon event, they would almost always get runny noses, sore throats, be more susceptible to little illnesses and sicknesses. And so they surveyed a whole lot of their other running colleagues and found that actually 8 out of 10 people reported the same thing, and which got them thinking, what effect is this having on our immune system? It seems pretty logical that running a marathon would be a fairly healthy thing to do, but is it? So to test this theory, what they did is they applied to survey 2,300 runners who had entered the 1987 LA Marathon. What they did was they followed these runners for the 2 months prior to the event and the weeks following the event to look at their training load as well as how sick they reported they were. What they found was in the following week after the marathon, those runners who had entered the race and run the race were 5.9 times more likely to be sick than those who had entered the race, trained for the race, but pulled out of the race for whatever reason other than illness. So they may have been injured, or they may have just not been able to get there, or whatever the reason was, any reason other than that they were sick. The cool thing about this study is that because of the pure numbers involved, it actually makes it one of the biggest study sizes of this type, even still today. So what's more is that when they looked the 2 months prior at their training, the people who were training more than 100 kilometers per week were twice as likely to get sick as the people who were training less than 100 kilometers per week. So this seemed to be pretty convincing evidence that running a marathon seemed to have a suppression effect on the immune system. That is, that it depleted it a little bit. Now, marathons are pretty grueling events, and maybe this might make sense. But what about all those people who were reporting that while they were training for it, they actually felt protected from sickness? So they decided to run another test, and they took 2 groups of people who were pretty sedentary, that is, they didn't do really any activity at all. And the first group, they got to walk for 45 minutes, 5 days a week. And the second group, they left to continue to be sedentary. So this was the control group. They did this experiment over 3 study periods of 12 to 15 weeks in duration. And what they found was that the people who were in the walking group actually had 43% less sick days reported than those who were in the control group. Since this study was done, there's actually been lots of other studies that were done as well looking at this same kind of thing, and all these studies show the same kind of effect. About 45 minutes of walking produces somewhere between a 40 and 50% reduction in illness days, which is pretty incredible. So how does this all work? What's happening within the body to make it respond really favourably to this moderate intensity exercise and actually reduce people's illness days by such a high percentage. I mean, 40 to 50% is quite significant. So there was a study that was done where they got a group of people to come into the lab and either walk for 45 minutes or sit down and do nothing for 45 minutes. And then their immune function was monitored over the 24 hours after that to see what was going on in the body. A week later, these people were asked to come back in and the roles were reversed. So if you walked on the treadmill the first time, the second time when you came in a week later, they got you to sit down for 45 minutes. If you sat down for 45 minutes, you then walked the next week. And same thing, looked at the immune function response over the next 24 hours. So what they found from these tests were that when you were walking on the treadmill, in the 24 hours after, really important immune cells were being released into circulation within the body. Once these cells were brought out into circulation, they essentially patrolled around the body looking for things that were supposed to be there, like germs and pathogens and viruses, etc. Unfortunately though, this doesn't seem to have a very lasting effect, and what they found was that the effect of this patrolling really only lasted about 3 hours or so after exercise. So the best analogy I could come up with for this is exercise is a little bit like standing on an ant's nest. So when you stand on an ant's nest, there's danger that's sensed within the colony, and they send their first line of defense out to A, see what's there, and to try and neutralize the threat. If you happen to be standing on the ant's nest, then you'll be swarmed, and the ants are either going to try and scare you off or neutralize you. If you do the smart thing and run away and remove yourself from the ant's nest, then eventually those ants will patrol around for a while and just make sure that there's still nothing there that could be a threat, but after a while they all go back inside. So exercise stirs up these immune cells and gets them out patrolling for dangers that they can then neutralize if need be. And they keep patrolling around for a little while after, but after a period of time, they then go back into the spleen and other immune organs. So lots and lots of studies have been done since then to try and work out if there is actually a cumulative effect to this protective mechanism of the immune system. That is, if you go and kick the ant's nest long enough, are they going to station some ants out the front to scare you off before you come? And unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be the case. There doesn't seem to be any long-term adaptation to this improved immune function. And so it seems to be more like a cumulative effect where if you exercise daily, you get this ongoing protection. But if you stop exercising, that protection goes away. So that's why it's so important to exercise daily, because you get that cumulative effect of the immune system improving and boosting for that few hours after exercise, and it allows it to clean out the body, and if there's anything that shouldn't be there, it can be dealt with before it really gets a chance to take hold. And that appears to be, from what we can tell, the reason why people in these studies report such fewer sick days than those who didn't do any exercise at all. So what about the first example? Why is it then that if we see this positive effect on the immune system, why is it that marathon runners see this repeatable, really strong suppression of their immune system? So the answer to this seems to be that when you do long duration, relenting exercise, like running a marathon or a half marathon even, that the sugar stores in your muscles start to get depleted, and this puts the body into a stress state where stress hormones are released like cortisol, and inflammatory markers are released into the body, and this process starts to deplete or reduce those immune cells from circulating around the body. Interestingly enough, things like high intensity interval training didn't seem to have the same effect as the more relenting type exercise like marathon running. And we think this is because that during interval training, yes, you're working for a much higher intensity, but the duration that you work during that intensity is quite a lot shorter. And so your body's sugar stores in the muscles don't get as depleted as that really long duration relenting exercise. So daily bouts of light to moderate activity is really helpful for boosting your immune function, and that benefit could be up to 40 to 50% if the research holds true, which we don't have any reason to suggest that it wouldn't for this COVID-19 outbreak. So on top of that, you're going to be getting great benefits to your mental health. It's going to get you out of the house a little bit, reduce your stress levels a little bit, and it's going to keep you guys nice and healthy, nice and active, which is a great thing at the moment. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you later.